It was his first and last network television interview. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer talking about his horrific crimes and trying to figure out for himself why he had such a compulsion to kill. Much had been made of the home environment in which he grew up and the marital strife to which he was exposed throughout his childhood. Could he have been so affected it would later drive him to commit unspeakable crimes? Dahmer had strong feelings about that. What do you remember about your parents arguing when you were growing up, and what effect that had on you?
It was unnerving, depressing, made me angry sometimes. I'd leave the house, go out in the woods and sulk, brooding, wondering why they had to have such a rough relationship. Most of the time they didn't seem to get along too well together. I never knew what the real underlying problems were. I didn't feel it was my place to ask.
Did you blame one or the other? Mom or Dad?
No, I didn't. I was just frustrated that things couldn't be happier around the house.
You just wanted things to be more peaceful.
Right. I never saw any real violent arguments as far as physical hitting or anything like that, but there was a lot of yelling, a lot of tension in the house sometimes.
All set? Everybody ready? Let's go. At the time of the interview, Jeffrey Dahmer's mother, Joyce, was writing her own book, tentatively titled An Assault on Motherhood. She insisted that her co-author sit next to her for support. The book was never published, and the co-author never appeared in the original broadcast. What kinds of things was Jeff exposed to? What kinds of things did he see and hear?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, what can I do? I can compare it with my own upbringing, and my mother and father fought, and it was kind of a normal thing, and they would get over it, and Lionel and I discovered very early on that we were very different people. I was more emotional and more outgoing than he was, and marriage became really a very unhappy place. And how much that affected the children at the time, I didn't think that it affected them in any really harmful way, because they were never physically abused.
There were very heated arguments. And on occasion that would lead to some physical.
Excuse me, Stone. If you want to stop a minute and think about whether you want to talk about that abuse.
How am I going to know what's going to be on television and what's not going to be?
Well, I mean, I think you need to assume, while only a very small portion of this will be on, I mean, I want you to be comfortable with what you say, because
one of the things that I don't want to get involved in on this television show is trying to do the same thing to Lionel as he's done to me, and that is to somehow blame him. So
I'm not asking. I really don't want to get to whose fault. No, we're rolling. But I'm just saying, I don't want to get. I am really not concerned with fault and whether it was you or whether it was Lionel. What I'm trying to understand is what was going on between you, for whatever reason. I'm sure both of you brought something to the table on that. That's usually the case in a marriage situation. My question is, what kinds of things, what do you recall about the kinds of things that were happening between you that Jeff may have been exposed to, and to the extent that there is some question about the kind of emotional turmoil that might have caused him?
Stone, I have to tell you, I've thought of that over and over again, and there's nothing about the kind of arguments, the kinds of fights we might have had, the disagreements over how to bring up children, there was nothing unusual about that. And Jeff is not the result of what is going on in every home in America. He's not the result of that.
So you're saying it wasn't a perfect marriage, you're saying, but it was nothing so extraordinary that it could explain
no,
why he went on to do what he did.
Absolutely not. Telling you the truth the very best I can, there wasn't anything unusual.
It was pretty intense, the arguments between the two of you.
Yeah, yes. A lot of the arguments were very intense, and I couldn't see any way but to just leave the room or leave the house, or just there was no compromise.
How much of this violence in the home was Jeff exposed to?
There were times when he heard the shouting and her physical agitated motions. He observed them, and he went outside and just left the house. And I learned later, I didn't know at the time, I didn't hear him do this, but I learned later that he was slapping the trees with branches and sticks, and I guess apparently out of frustration. So apparently Jeff was very disturbed over the arguments. I have no doubt that he was very disturbed.
There are thousands, literally thousands of children who grow up exposed to these kinds of problems.
And worse.
And worse. And yet they don't go on to do the kinds of things that Jeff did.
In and of themselves, they're not I guess we would say, not the only factors. But, you know, everyone's an individual, I guess, aren't they? But there may have been more important, unknown to us yet, trigger points that make Jeff more unique than the usual case.
When you think back on those times, the arguments and the possible effect it may have had on the kids, does it cause you anguish?
It makes me sick that we didn't have a more Ozzie and Harriet type family. And I know there really are no Ozzie and Harriet families per se, but there are some that really, really are healthy, quite healthy. And ours could have been. And it just makes me sick to my stomach that it wasn't. That's how I feel. You know, feel that way to my death.